Hi there BookTube, it's Eleanor here. Now, as you may or may not know, recently I have gone to book jail. My Bookopoly challenge that I set myself for this year, which I've been doing with Janet from Swirly Girly Reads, I'll link up above some more information on that, says that if I buy a book in the month, I need to read it straight away in order to get out of book jail, and it also means that I cannot contribute any money to my Bookopoly pot. Now that in itself isn't the end of the world, although it does mean there'll be less in the pot for the end of the year when myself and Janet have our little bookish treat. But I always find when I get excited about a book, I buy it and then it sits on the shelf and it loses quite the impetus that it gained at the beginning. And so I bought 4 books last month and I wanted to make sure that I stuck to my Bookopoly goal, and I did. And I wanted to talk to you about them and talk about whether they were worth it. So I'll talk to you briefly about my thoughts on the book and the rating I gave them, and then whether overall these books were worth going to jail for. The first book will come as no surprise. I loved this, the first 2 books in this series, Illuminated and Gemina, and Obsidio came out and I needed to have it. This is by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. It's a really unusual formatted book. I love the way that they've played around and used sort of audio transcripts and emails and different data, and it's almost like this case has been compiled and we're looking back and flitting back at the events of this story. This is the final book in the trilogy, and it really it was a wholly satisfying ending for me. It ticked all the boxes for me, into including new characters but also keeping old characters at the forefront as well, which I think is really important for that continuity and tying it up. As usual with these books in this series, the first 25 to 30 pages or so, I feel a little bit daunted. I feel like I'm not going to be able to get into the format and into the story. I feel it hard to sort of get changed into this different type of format and the information that's getting put in and remembering the backstory. But after about 30 pages, I realise I'm in safe hands and I just fly through these books and gobble them up, and I just think they're brilliant. This one put me through a shit ton of emotional turmoil and action-packed adventure and warm fuzzy emotional parts. It was a real page turner in all respects and a real emotional drainer. I ended up giving this a solid 5 stars. I can't talk to you much about the story because it would spoil, but Illuminated, which is the first book in the trilogy, starts off this series. It's set in space and it's set around an event that's happened on this mining colony where it's been invaded, and it's following groups of teenagers and young people as they experience what happens in the aftermath of that, and what the things that occur and unravel. I can't say more than that because I really do think it's worth going in and finding out for yourself, but a solid 5 stars, and this one was definitely worth going to jail for. Next, again, maybe no surprise, I read Scythe and loved it, and so I picked up Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman, which is the second in this series, and oh, I am loving this so much. This is set, I won't talk to you about Thunderhead, but Scythe, the first book in the series, and obviously Thunderhead is set in the same universe, but it's set in a world where in the future we have managed to cure death, so people don't die anymore, people don't get ill, and so the only way to manage the population, which is obviously ever increasing because people aren't dying, is to have this group of people that are set outside of the Thunderhead, which is this computer system. So the world isn't governed by a government anymore, it's governed by this all-being computer entity called the Thunderhead, which has sort of stemmed out of the World Wide Web. It's become this all-knowing, all-powerful thing that can stop things like poverty and issues that are going on before they occur, because it's got all this information, and so the world is sort of governed by them. And then outside of this is this group that has been set up away from the Thunderhead called the Scythe, and they're not managed by anybody. They are a group of scythes who go out and they do what is called gleaning, and so they go and they kill a number of the population each in order to keep numbers down. They each do it in different ways, and they take on apprentices to start new to bring new scythes into the order, and it's really interesting. It's a really interesting idea. It's interesting to see motivations. It's interesting to see how people do things. And inside we see two main characters are introduced, and they are two apprentices to one particular scythe, and we watch their journey. And Thunderhead continued that journey wonderfully. It was another solid 5 stars from me, and definitely worth going to jail for. The next book I picked up because I kept hearing how great it was Big Bones by Laura Dockwell, and again I really enjoyed the idea of this. I thought it was a wonderful body positivity book. We're following our main character Bluebell, or BB. She is a larger girl, she enjoys food, and she's been told by a community nurse that she needs to have a food diary for the summer because she's overweight, and her mother has asked her to do it in sort of she's said that if Bluebell does this, then Bluebell can leave school and work and leave at 16, and she's got to do it over the summer. So we're following her writing in this diary over the summer and what's going on in their lives. She's got a bit of a tumultuous home life. She's got some really interesting things going on. She's got, her sister is really interesting. She's a couple of years younger, and she's I think it's called free running. It's got another name, but where you sort of run around on buildings and climb and jump. I thought that side was really interesting. Her father and mother are currently sort of separated and back together, and separated and back together, so that side is interesting. It's interesting to see Bluebell's outlook on how she feels about her body and what she thinks about it, and how she sticks up for herself and she takes the route of being positive. And this book talks about food. It's very evocative of good food and nutritious food, and I love the way she talks about that, and you can tell that this character loves food, but not, you know, she's not shoveling in things that you would think, oh, you know, all these bad foods all the time. She just eats really yeah, lovely sounding recipes. In fact, there was some that I was like, oh, that sounds great. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a really good read, a really fast-paced read. I gave it 4 stars in the end. It didn't quite reach a 5-star for me, but it was definitely worth going to jail for. The next book I haven't actually got anymore because I took it on holiday, and once I'd finished it I left it there for someone else to enjoy, but that is The Exact Opposite of Okay by Laura Stephen, and I really enjoyed this one. We're following our main character Izzy, and she is a regular girl. She lives with her grandma. She is at school and she enjoys life. She has quite a healthy sex life, and she is an aspiring comic screenwriter. She really wants to just write comedy and get into some sort of film or arts film school, and she hasn't got the money to do this. She finds out about a competition through her drama teacher and decides that she's going to enter herself, and then along the way we're following her relationship between her best friends, and then there is a bit of a scandal that occurs, and we're following the backlash of that and how she handles it, how other people handle it, and how it makes her feel, and how people treat her. It's taking a really brutal look at slut shaming and the way that women are portrayed, and how differently they're portrayed often to men when it comes to promiscuity and having a healthy sex life, or maybe not even healthy, but having a sex life, and, you know, not only over having one partner in the whole life, and how women are very differently perceived in that way to men. I really enjoyed this. It was again a really interesting read, a really fast-paced read. There was lots to be thinking about whilst I was reading it. It didn't quite hit the 5-star again for me, but it was a real solid 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, and it was definitely worth going to jail for. So 4 for 4, 2 5-stars, 2 4-star books, all worth going to jail for. So I'm pleased that I gave this jail part ago, because although it's not something that I will be repeating on a regular basis, I do now know that if I decide there's a book I really must have, if I pick it up I can read it straight away, and often it's really worth that. It's worth taking that time, worth getting to it straight away, because then you really enjoy it, and you really enjoy it at the time that you really wanted to enjoy it. So yay. These books were all worth going to jail for. Have you read any? Do you think they're worth going to jail for? Have you got any books that you read recently that you have gone to jail for? Let's chat as always, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Bye for now, BookTube.